Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Well, the president is at it again. He's coming forth with a rather radical but impressive immigration policy. It's long overdue that we would have a reform of our immigration. And what he wants to do is to make sure that the immigrants can speak English and have some sort of skill and perhaps a little bit of an IQ. Well, the left is already screaming it's un-American to demand that people can speak English. Let's take them in from anywhere. Well, why is that? Well, because if they can't read and write, then maybe they'll vote Democratic. That's the idea. But Trump is saying, no, I want an educated immigration group. And, well, we'll see. The fight is on, among other things.
They should assimilate, don't you think?
Well, of course they should. And we ought to speak English, too. We shouldn't be having the idea that you've got 50 different languages. You know, they use the term polyglot, and English is important to understand our laws and our culture, and whoever's here should be immersed in English so that they can get ahead in our society. And it would be for their benefit that we make sure we teach English.
Absolutely.
Very important. All right.
Well, and Republicans in the Senate are making it clear again. It may take a while, but they still aren't giving up on dealing with Obamacare. Jenna Browder brings us that story from Washington.
President Trump is making good on campaign promises. When it comes to immigration, he's endorsing a new plan that aims to overhaul the current system.
This legislation demonstrates our compassion for struggling American families who deserve an immigration system that puts their needs first and that puts America first.
Standing with Senators Tom Cotton and David Perdue, Trump pushed their bill to slash legal immigration in half. The measure would put skilled workers and English speakers at the front of the line and limit admissions based on family connections.
Over 50% of our households of legal immigrants today participate in our social welfare system.
The legislation was first introduced in February, but didn't get much traction. And now already some fellow Republicans are speaking out against it.
This idea of skewing the entire green card pool to one area of the economy, I think is very misplaced.
Senator Lindsey Graham says he supports merit-based immigration, but worries about the legislation's impact on agriculture, tourism, and service industries. Democrats call it an affront to American values and a threat to the U.S. economy. And White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders appeared on CBN's Faith Nation, where she talked about the president signing a new bill on sanctions with Russia, North Korea, and Iran, despite calling it seriously flawed and something that limits his ability to negotiate.
We have been very clear since the beginning that this administration is going to be tough on Russia, tough on North Korea, tough on Iran, and certainly wanted to be supportive of those sanctions, but also wanted to do so properly.
At the same time, Republicans are pushing ahead with plans for tax cuts, and some senators are taking a different approach on health care reform. Days after the Republican effort to repeal and replace Obamacare crumbled in the Senate, some lawmakers say they're reaching across the aisle to work together.
I think we can resolve those problems, but it's going to take more bipartisan work.
We have a lot of bipartisan discussions going on right now, more than we've had in months.
But not all Republicans think they'll be able to reach a deal with Democrats. And President Trump says he's not giving up either, but if the effort fails again, he says Obamacare will have to run its course.
Let Obamacare explode. It is exploding right now.
You know, I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode and then do it.
President Trump is looking for wins wherever they may be. That's why he's moving forward on immigration and tax reform while still holding out for health care. Reporting in Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
You know, I think the idea of providing subsidies, and that's what the Democrats want. They want subsidies to bolster up Obamacare, which is failing. And so we would be shoveling out tax money. And one federal judge has already said it's unconstitutional because the Congress hasn't really appropriated it. And yet the Obama administration did it anyhow. They shoveled out money. And that district court decision went to the D.C. Circuit, and they're pending a decision on it. If it hits the Supreme Court, I think the Supreme Court would go along with the district court judge. But the whole idea of a under-the-table subsidy to keep those exchanges going, is wrong. It's unconstitutional. It wasn't in the original bill, as bad as that bill was. And President Trump should not cave in on that one. He ought to hold fast and say, no way are we going to give subsidies to keep that failing stuff alive. And we talked yesterday about the subsidies being given to members of Congress and their staffs, a 73% subsidy of their premiums that's coming out of taxpayer dollars, out of your pocket, so that they can have what you don't have. And they can have a Cadillac-type health care program paid for by the government. And the way they did it was, again, sleight of hand by declaring that the Senate and the House of Representatives are, quote, small businesses, and that they could apply to the exchanges in the District of Columbia where employers can subsidize the health care of their employees if they're small businesses. And that's just one of those little sneaky things they've done. Let's not give them any more money, Mr. President. Hold fast. They will sucker you in and hurt you. Don't let them do that. Well, the president and the country got some good news yesterday. The Dow Jones closed above 22,000 for the first time in its history. And many analysts think the market will keep going higher. President Trump is also a major foreign policy crisis to deal with, a growing nuclear threat from North Korea, and Wendy has that.
That's right, Pat. The U.S. military put North Korea on notice Wednesday when it successfully test-launched an intercontinental ballistic missile from California. The launch came just days after North Korea's second test of an ICBM, one that could have proved deadly. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales has the story.
Early Wednesday morning, the United States sent a strong message to North Korea and its leader Kim Jong-un. An unarmed Minuteman III missile was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base about 130 miles northwest of Los Angeles. An Air Force statement said that the test was not in response to the recent actions by North Korea, but shows that America's nuclear enterprise is, quote, safe, secure, effective, and ready to be able to deter, detect, and defend against attacks on the United States and its allies. Last week, North Korea tested an ICBM for the second time. The missile flew for 45 minutes and traveled more than 2,300 miles into space. Analysts said the missile could have reached cities like Los Angeles and Chicago. In a disturbing development, the missile came down right in the middle of busy commercial airspace. Flight data shows an Air France 777 jetliner with 323 people on board was traveling from Tokyo to Paris and past the area. 10 minutes later, the North Korean missile came down on the plane's direct flight path.
The crew of this plane had no idea that they were in danger because the missile was coming in from outer space. And what if this missile had broken up at altitude and scattered pieces all around? It would have made it even more dangerous.
The Pentagon has said North Korea's missile launches are done with no coordination and are reckless. Meanwhile, the United States, through the State Department, has taken a softer approach with North Korea, telling the cloaked country and its leader that the United States is not your enemy.
We do not seek a regime change. We do not seek the collapse of the regime. We do not seek an accelerated reunification of the peninsula. We do not seek an excuse to send our military north of the 38th parallel.
However, in the same breath, Secretary Tillerson said the United States still requires North Korea to end its missile and nuclear program. And although he said the U.S. seeks dialogue with the North, he added that, quote, our other options are not attractive. Later this week, Secretary Tillerson plans to head to Asia for a security meeting. It's expected to be attended by diplomats from North Korea, Japan, South Korea, and China. It could be an opportune moment for diplomatic breakthrough. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Eric. Pat, how should we deal with North Korea?
Well, you know, John Bolton had a very excellent piece today in the Wall Street Journal, and saying essentially, we've got to go after them. I don't know what Tillerson's thinking about. I mean, just like that thing in Qatar, he's in Qatar. I mean, he's saying different things than what the president might be saying. We don't seek regime change. Of course we do. We want regime change. We want that bunch of criminals and crazies out of there and somebody responsible to take over that country. And yes, we would like to see reunification between the South and the North. And yes, we may have to have a military option in there. And to say we don't seek it, well, I don't know what he's talking about. But the truth is, we need to pinpoint all of their nuclear facilities. We need to pinpoint all of their launch sites. The one way I was talking to the president when I was interviewing him about that, I said, you know, if they have one coming off the launch pad, it's very vulnerable, and that's the time we could shoot it down. And would that be an option? Well, the answer is, of course it is. But I would think Tomahawk missiles against all of those artillery batteries throughout North Korea would be an appropriate response, but we've got to be ready along the way to decimate that whole nation, because they are holding us hostage. If they get a nuclear-tipped missile that can hit Denver or hit Chicago or hit Los Angeles, and they're crazy enough to let one go, I mean, we're talking about several million of our fellow citizens being incinerated by those people. We can't allow that to happen. And the president is charged with keeping our country safe, and you've got a rabid dog running around the street biting people. You've got to put him down. Wendy?
Is reportedly frustrated with his military advisors on Afghanistan. NBC reports that Trump said the U.S. is losing in Afghanistan. He said that at a meeting last month. The president hasn't been happy with the options the military has given him either. One of the biggest questions is whether or not to send more troops in. The U.S. has about 8,400 there now. Some advisors want to send several thousand more, while others support a limited U.S. role. The Afghanistan war is the longest in U.S. history, going into its 16th year now, Pat.
Wendy, I just don't see Afghanistan. You know, there have been a number of conquerors back to Alexander the Great that have not exactly done successfully in Afghanistan. It's mountainous, it's tribal, it is broken into factions. They make the biggest amount of money selling opium. I mean, it's the kind of thing, I just don't see it as strategic. I think Pakistan, on the other hand, is, and Pakistan ought to get their act together and start behaving themselves. But nevertheless, to put more money and treasure into Afghanistan, you say, well, you're going to win it. Having won, what have you got? And then we don't want to govern Afghanistan. We had that Karzai and some of those corrupt people trying to run the country, and it was a joke. And you have tribal leaders, you have the Pashtuns, you have various tribal factions. They fight each other all the time. They kill each other. They've been doing it for centuries. Why do we want to get involved? Russia tried to do it and failed. Why should we do it? And I think the president is saying you're losing the war. Yes. And we have been losing the war, and I don't think it's appropriate to go anymore. But that's my point of view, and maybe I'm a little too dovish, Wendy.
Well, Pat, we've had an overwhelming response to a report we brought you last week. Sweden wants to deport an Iranian Christian woman, but her newfound faith in Jesus could mean death if she's forced to return. Dale Hurd brings us this update on her situation.
Since CBN News first brought you her story, Aydin Stranson's future remains in limbo. She waits either for political asylum or to be deported. The Iranian actress left Islam to become a Christian after having a dream about Jesus. She came to Sweden in 2014 on a work visa. Aydin has been very public about her new faith, which means she faces prison, rape, and death if returned to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
It's so dangerous for me, and I don't know why immigration don't believe that. I'm really in a danger.
Even though Sweden's migration board says on its own webpage that it will never deport asylum seekers to nations where they face danger, and doing so is a violation of the Geneva Convention on Refugees, the migration board rejected Aydin's request for asylum and turned her case over to border police for eventual deportation. Swedish attorney Gabriel Donner.
Well, the Migration Board information regarding Iranian prisoners tells us that torture and rape is common. And it is also in breach of international law to subject any person to such treatment.
So many CBN viewers contacted the Migration Board after our story aired that a Migration Board official contacted CBN News and told us The fact that your readers write to us will not change the migration agency's decision, nor can we change the court's decision. Her case has been appealed and processed by the migration agency, and thereafter by the Swedish courts, which have also decided that she cannot be granted asylum. CBN News has received many offers of help and even asylum for Aydin from other nations. But Stransson cannot leave Sweden on her own. Her Iranian passport has been taken away. And she says her first choice is to remain in Sweden if possible. Stransson and other Christian asylum seekers in Sweden face deportation at the same time the Swedish government has given 150 protected identities to former ISIS fighters who have returned to Sweden so that they can find jobs. There will be no such help for Aydin.
They said to me, it's your personal life, and it's not a problem if you decided to be a Christian, and it's your problem.
Donner says Christians deported to Muslim nations face certain danger.
Some of them are killed straight off, some of them succeed in going into hiding, some of them escape to some other place, but you are putting them at risk.
The head of Sweden's migration board, Mikael Ribbenvik, could order her case reopened. But Aydin is now relying on a power much greater than the Swedish government, the power of Jesus Christ.
I think about that dream I had in Iran about Jesus, and I still think he's watching me. He will help me.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Dale tells us that he heard from Aydin earlier today. Her attorney is going to try for a new hearing next week. And Pat, obviously, we need to keep this in prayer.
I think this is becoming a worldwide scandal for Sweden. Sweden was known during the Nazi era as a haven for people trying to escape the Nazi terror. And you look at Count Bernadotte and people like that who were so well known in the world for their humanitarian activity. And then to see this particular crazy bureaucratic nonsense being carried out is just appalling. It seems like the United States could give that girl a temporary visa, a green card in a hurry and let her come over here or go someplace else. But there's no question if she goes back to Iran, she'll be raped and killed. There's no question about it. And so to say that there's no danger, there's no terror, I mean, the Swedes are, come on, I mean, get real. And I think it's time they do that, but there's opprobrium coming against that nation from all over the world because of their treatment of this woman.